The stars had always called to humanity, and finally they had answered. In the year 2247, Earth's first faster-than-light vessel completed its maiden voyage beyond the solar system. The celebration lasted 3 days across every nation and colony. People danced in the streets. Children dreamed of distant worlds, and leaders spoke of a bright future among the cosmos. That joy lasted exactly 1 week before everything changed. The Galactic Council arrived without warning. 12 massive ships appeared in orbit around Earth, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They were beautiful in a way that made Kyle Harris feel small. He stood on the bridge of the Defiant, humanity's newest diplomatic vessel, and watched those alien ships through the viewscreen. His reflection stared back at him, a man in his 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 30 years preparing for this moment, studying every theory about first contact, every protocol for meeting alien life. None of it had prepared him for the reality. "They're hailing us," said Lisa Grant from her captain's chair. She was younger than Kyle, maybe 40, with short black hair and a military bearing that came from 20 years in Earth's space fleet. Her fingers moved across her console with practiced ease, audio and visual. "They're speaking English." "Of course they are," muttered Jake Morrison from his station near the back. He was the Defiant's strategic officer, a thin man with nervous hands and a mind that never stopped analyzing. "They've probably been watching us for years." Kyle nodded to Lisa. "Put them through." The viewscreen changed, and suddenly they were looking at something that was definitely not human. The alien had 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern on its face, skin that shimmered like oil on water, and a mouth that moved in ways that made Kyle's stomach turn. When it spoke, the words were perfect English, but the voice sounded like it came from everywhere at once. "Greetings, humans of Earth. I am High Chancellor Zixthar, representative of the Galactic Council. We have been aware of your species for some time. Now that you have achieved faster-than-light travel, it is time for formal integration into galactic society." Kyle stepped forward, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "I am Ambassador Kyle Harris, speaking for the unified government of Earth and her colonies. We are honored to meet you and eager to learn about our galactic neighbors." The alien's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Your enthusiasm is noted. However, there are protocols that must be followed. All species that achieve interstellar travel must accept the terms of the Council. This is not negotiable. It is simply how things are done." Something in those words made Lisa sit up straighter. Kyle noticed her hand move closer to her weapon console. He filed that observation away for later. "What terms?" Kyle asked. "Standard integration terms," Zixthar said, as if this should be obvious. "You will surrender 60% of your military vessels to Council oversight. All expansion beyond your current territory must be approved by the Council. You will pay annual tribute in resources and materials, and you will adopt Council-approved structures for your government to ensure compliance with galactic law." The bridge went silent. Kyle felt his mouth go dry. He had expected regulations, perhaps some restrictions on weapons or territory. This was something else entirely. "That sounds less like integration and more like subjugation," Lisa said, her voice hard. Zixthar's eyes blinked again. "Your terms are crude. The Council provides protection, stability, and access to galactic trade. These benefits require contribution from member species. Every civilization that has joined the Council in the last 3,000 years has accepted these terms. You are no different." Jake Morrison stood up from his station. He held a datapad, his fingers scrolling through information rapidly. "Ambassador, I'm reading the full terms they transmitted. It's worse than he's saying. We would have no autonomy over our own military. The tribute amounts to 40% of our gross resources annually. And the government oversight means they can veto any law or policy they don't like." Kyle felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his face neutral. 30 years of diplomatic training had taught him to never show emotion during negotiations. "High Chancellor, these terms would effectively make Earth a subordinate state. Surely there is room for discussion." "There is no discussion," Zixthar replied. "These are the terms. They have been refined over thousands of years. They ensure peace and order in the galaxy. You will accept them." "And if we don't?" Lisa asked. The alien's mouth moved in what might have been a smile. "Then we will implement enforcement measures. The Council has significant military assets. Resistance is inadvisable and ultimately futile. You would not be the first species to refuse, and you would not be the first to be brought into compliance by force." Kyle looked at Lisa, then at Jake. Both of them looked back at him with the same expression. This wasn't first contact. This was a threat. "Hi, Chancellor," Kyle said slowly. "Humanity has just achieved interstellar travel. We have much to learn about galactic civilization. These terms require serious consideration by our government. I request time to consult with Earth's leaders." Zixthar was quiet for a moment. The other alien ships in orbit seemed to move closer, though that might have been Kyle's imagination. "Very well. You have 30 days to reach a decision. Return to your world. Discuss among yourselves. But understand this, the terms are not negotiable. Acceptance or enforcement, those are your only options." The screen went black. The bridge lights seemed dimmer somehow, as if the conversation had drained the energy from the room. Kyle turned to face his crew. There were 20 people on the bridge, and all of them looked shocked. "Captain Grant," Kyle said, "set course for Earth, maximum speed." "Yes, sir." Lisa's fingers moved across her console. "We'll be home in 6 hours." Kyle walked to the observation window and stared out at the stars. They didn't look beautiful anymore. They looked dangerous, full of civilizations that thought humanity was just another species to be controlled. Jake Morrison came to stand beside him. "They're serious, aren't they?" "About the enforcement, yes," Kyle said. "They've done this before. Probably hundreds of times. What are we going to do?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Earth, about the colonies on Mars and Europa and Titan. He thought about the children he had seen dancing in the streets, celebrating humanity's achievement. He thought about all the dreams of a peaceful future among the stars. "We're going to tell Earth the truth," he said finally, "and then we're going to make a decision that every other species apparently failed to make." "What decision?" Kyle turned to look at the young officer. "Whether we're going to be free or safe. Because the Council is offering safety at the cost of everything that makes us human." The journey back to Earth felt longer than it was. Kyle spent most of it in his quarters, reading through the Council's terms over and over. Jake had been right. The details were worse than Zixthar had admitted. The tribute wasn't just resources. It included technology sharing that was entirely one-sided. The Council would have access to all human research and development, but they would share nothing in return. The military restrictions didn't just limit ship numbers. They specified weapon types, defense platforms, even the training protocols for soldiers. It was a system designed to keep humanity weak and dependent forever. Lisa came to his quarters 3 hours into the journey. She didn't knock, just walked in and sat down across from him. "You look like hell," she said. "I feel worse." Kyle rubbed his eyes. "How long have they been doing this, Lisa? How many species are out there living under these terms?" Jake's been researching. "The Council claims to represent 73 member species. If even half of them are living under conditions like this, that's a lot of subjugated civilizations. And nobody ever fought back?" Lisa was quiet. "Zixthar said some species refused. He said they were brought into compliance by force." "That's a nice way of saying they were conquered." "Yeah." Lisa leaned forward. "Kyle, I need to say something as a military officer, not as captain of this ship. Those Council vessels are impressive, but they're old. The designs are beautiful, but they're not efficient. They're not built for war. They're built for intimidation." Kyle looked up at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if they've been using the same ships and the same tactics for 3,000 years, they might not be as invincible as they think. They've gotten comfortable. Nobody challenges them anymore, so they don't have to stay sharp. You think we could fight them?" Lisa hesitated. "I think if we accepted their terms, we would never get strong enough to fight them. They would make sure of that. But if we refused now, while we still have our full military and our independence, we might have a chance." Kyle stood and walked to the window. Earth was visible now, a blue and white sphere growing larger. Home. Everything humanity had ever known was on that planet or in orbit around it. Could he really recommend a course of action that might lead to war? But the alternative was surrender. Not just for this generation, but for all the generations to come. Humanity would become something less than it was, locked in place by aliens who saw them as nothing more than another tributary state. "When we land," Kyle said, "I'm going to recommend that Earth refuse the emergency summit began 12 hours after the Defiant landed. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in Geneva. along with governors from the Mars colonies, Europa Station, and the Titan settlements. Kyle Harris sat at the main table, exhausted but unable to rest. Beside him sat Lisa Grant and Jake Morrison. Across from them were the most powerful people in human civilization. Prime Minister Helen Scott of the United Earth Federation spoke first. She was a tall woman in her 60s with silver hair and a reputation for finding compromise in impossible situations. Ambassador Harris, please summarize what happened for those who haven't reviewed the full report. Kyle stood. The room went quiet. 200 people watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to fear. 3 days ago, we made first contact with the Galactic Council. They claim to represent 73 alien species. They presented us with terms for joining galactic civilization. These terms are not negotiable according to them. We have 30 days to accept or face what they call enforcement measures. And these terms? Asked General Marcus Webb, commander of Earth's Unified Defense Forces. He was a big man with dark skin and sharp eyes that missed nothing. They want 60% of our military fleet, annual tribute of 40% of our resources, veto power over our laws and government, complete access to our technology with no reciprocal sharing, approval authority over all our expansion into space. Kyle paused. In short, they want us to become a subordinate state with no real sovereignty. The room erupted. Voices rose in anger, fear, and disbelief. Helen Scott raised her hand, calling for order. It took several minutes for the noise to die down. Surely they're open to negotiation, said President Liu Chun of the Asian Coalition. These can't be final terms. They insisted the terms are standard and non-negotiable, Kyle said. They claim every species that joined the Council in the last 3,000 years accepted these exact terms. Then every species that joined was a fool, said Governor Patricia Moore of Mars Colony. She was young for her position, barely 40, with red hair and a temper to match. We didn't spend 2 centuries building colonies and spreading across the solar system just to hand it all over to aliens. The alternative might be war, Helen Scott said quietly. That brought another wave of silence. War with an alien civilization that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. War with a council that claimed to control 73 species. War with technology and weapons humanity couldn't begin to understand. General Marcus Webb stood. I've had my people analyzing the data from the encounter. The council ships are impressive in size, but their technology appears older than we expected. Their vessels use fusion drives we abandoned 20 years ago. Their weapon signatures match railgun technology. Effective but not revolutionary. I'm not saying we could win a war, but I am saying they might not be as advanced as they want us to believe. Dr. Peter Kane raised his hand. He was humanity's leading expert on xenosociology. A thin man with glasses who had spent his career studying theoretical alien cultures. General Webb is correct to be cautious about assuming their superiority. But there's something else we should consider. Why does the Council use these terms? Why demand tribute and control? Because they're tyrants, Patricia Moore said. Perhaps, Dr. Kane replied. But tyrants need reasons. I've been studying the data Ambassador Harris brought back. The Council's terms are specifically designed to prevent technological advancement. Member species can't develop new weapons. They can't expand without approval. They can't keep their resources for research and development. It's a system designed to maintain the status quo forever. Jake Morrison stood up from his seat. Dr. Kane is right. I've been analyzing the economic impact of the tribute system. If we accepted these terms, we would have no surplus for innovation. Every breakthrough we made would be shared with the Council, while they shared nothing with us. Within 2 generations, we would fall behind. Within 5, we would be completely dependent on them. Helen Scott looked troubled. Are you saying the Council deliberately keeps member species weak? I'm saying the system has that effect whether it's deliberate or not, Jake replied. And I found something else. He brought up a holographic display that filled the center of the room. It showed a timeline with dozens of species names. The Council provided a list of member species and when they joined. I cross-referenced this with the technological capabilities they demonstrated in their joining applications. Every single species stopped advancing after they joined. Some of them have been at the same tech level for over 1,000 years. The room went silent again. People stared at the data, seeing the truth written in numbers and timelines. The Galactic Council wasn't offering integration. It was offering stagnation. We can't accept these terms, said a voice from the back. It was Amy Brooks, a lieutenant who had been part of the Defiance analysis team. She was young, maybe 25, with blonde hair and a confident voice that carried through the room. I'm sorry to speak out of turn, but I've been studying the Council's history. They claim to be about peace and order, but they're really about control. Every species that accepted their terms became frozen in time. No growth, no change, no freedom. Is that what we want for humanity? What we want and what we can survive are different things, Helen Scott said. If we refuse and they attack, millions could die. General Marcus Webb stood again. Prime Minister, I won't lie to you. A war with the Council would be costly, but I've been gaming out scenarios with my staff. If we accept their terms, we lose without fighting. We become something less than we are. If we fight, we at least have a chance. A chance at what? Someone shouted. Survival? A chance at remaining human, Marcus replied. At staying free. The debate raged for hours. Some argued for acceptance with negotiations to soften the terms. Others demanded complete refusal. A few suggested accepting now and rebelling later, once humanity understood galactic civilization better. Kyle listened to all of it, saying nothing, watching the patterns emerge. Finally, as the sun set outside the windows, Kyle stood again. The room gradually quieted. I've listened to every argument, he said, and I understand the fear. The Council is offering us a choice between safety and freedom. That's a hard choice, but I think we're looking at this wrong. How so? Helen Scott asked. Kyle walked to the center of the room, standing beside the holographic display. Every species that joined the Council faced this same choice. Every one of them chose safety. They accepted the terms, surrendered their sovereignty, and became part of a system that guaranteed they would never threaten the Council's power. And now, 3,000 years later, the Council is so comfortable with this system that they can't imagine anyone refusing. What are you suggesting? Asked President Liu Chen. I'm suggesting we don't just refuse their terms. I'm suggesting we offer our own. The room erupted in noise again. Kyle waited for it to die down. The Council expects one of two responses, he continued. Acceptance or armed resistance. What if we give them neither? What if we refuse their terms but offer an alternative? Real integration based on mutual respect and equal partnership. Free trade without tribute. Technology sharing that goes both ways. Recognition of each other's sovereignty. They'll never accept that, Patricia Moore said. Probably not, Kyle agreed. But it changes the conversation. Right now, they think they're offering us a generous deal. They think we should be grateful. If we propose real partnership instead, we expose what they really are. We show them that we understand their system is built on subjugation, and we reject it completely. Dr. Peter Kane was nodding slowly. It's a psychological strategy. You're challenging their entire worldview. They think they're the civilized ones bringing order to primitive species. If we treat them as equals and demand they do the same, it undermines their whole justification for the Council system. Lisa Grant leaned forward. And if they attack anyway, then we fight, Kyle said simply. But we fight knowing we refuse to surrender without even trying. We fight knowing we gave them a chance to do the right thing. General Marcus Webb smiled. I like it. It puts the moral weight on them. They become the aggressors, not us. Helen Scott was quiet for a long time. Finally, she looked up at Kyle. You're proposing we bet humanity's future on the Council being unwilling to destroy a species that asks for nothing more than equal treatment? I'm proposing we bet on ourselves, Kyle replied. On our ability to defend what matters. On our willingness to stand for something, even when it's dangerous. Every species that joined the Council made a different choice. They chose survival over dignity. I'm asking if humanity wants to make the same choice. The vote took 3 hours. Every nation, every colony, every representative had to weigh in. Some argued passionately for acceptance. Others demanded defiance. In the end, the decision came down to a simple question that Helen Scott posed to the Assembly. What do we want to be? She asked. Do we want to be safe or do we want to be free? The vote was not unanimous. 37 representatives voted to accept the Council's terms with the hope of negotiating changes later. But 163 voted to refuse the terms and offer humanity's counter-proposal instead. The Grand Assembly Hall was unlike anything Kyle Harris had imagined. It was a space station the size of a moon, constructed from materials that seemed to shift colors in the light of nearby stars. Inside, the main chamber could have held a dozen cities. Towers rose from a central platform. each one representing a different council species. At the center sat 12 thrones arranged in a circle, each occupied by an alien representative. Kyle walked across the polished floor with Lisa Grant and Jake Morrison flanking him. Their footsteps echoed in the vast space. Above them, thousands of aliens watched from viewing galleries. This was a spectacle, Kyle realized. The council had invited an audience to watch humanity accept their terms. High Chancellor Zixthar sat on the largest throne, his 4 eyes watching the humans approach. The other 11 representatives were equally alien. One looked like a mass of tentacles held together by will alone. Another resembled a crystalline structure that pulsed with light. A third was covered in scales that changed color constantly. Humanity had dreamed of meeting alien life for centuries. Now Kyle stood before 12 species at once, and all he felt was cold determination. "Ambassador Harris," Zixthar said, his voice filling the chamber, "you have reached a decision regarding the terms of integration?" "We have," Kyle replied. His voice was steady, amplified by systems he couldn't see. "But before we respond, I have questions." The alien's eyes blinked in sequence. "Questions are unnecessary. The terms are clear. Nevertheless, I would like clarification. You claim that 73 species have accepted these terms. How many refused?" Zixthar was silent for a moment. 47 species initially refused the terms. And what happened to them? They were brought into compliance through enforcement measures. "This is standard procedure." Kyle nodded slowly. "So they were conquered, forced to accept through military action." "They were integrated for their own protection," another council member said. It was the tentacled being, speaking in a voice like rustling leaves. "Young species often lack perspective. The council must sometimes provide guidance through strength." "Guidance through strength," Kyle repeated. "You mean subjugation?" Zixthar leaned forward on his throne. "Ambassador, your tone is concerning. You asked for this audience to provide humanity's response. Please do so." Kyle reached into his jacket and pulled out a data chip. He held it up for all to see. "This contains humanity's official response to the Galactic Council's terms. Before I present it, I want everyone here to understand something. Every member of the Council, every species watching from above, everyone listening across the galaxy." He paused, making sure he had complete attention. "Humanity rejects your terms. All of them. Completely and without reservation." The chamber erupted in noise. Aliens chittered, roared, and made sounds Kyle had no words for. Zixthar raised one hand and silence fell like a hammer. "You refuse?" The High Chancellor's voice was cold. "You understand what refusal means?" "We understand perfectly," Kyle said. "But we're not simply refusing. We're offering counterterms. Real integration based on mutual respect and equal partnership." He tossed the data chip toward the center of the council. It hung in the air, suspended by some technology Kyle didn't understand. Rotating slowly, information began to display in the air around it, visible to everyone in the chamber. "These are humanity's terms," Kyle continued. "First, mutual recognition of sovereignty. Earth and all human territories remain under human governance with no external oversight. Second, free trade agreements with no tribute requirements. Third, technology and knowledge sharing that benefits all parties equally. Fourth, equal voting rights in council decisions for all member species. And fifth, the immediate dissolution of the enforcement fleet and all mechanisms of forced compliance." The silence that followed was absolute. Kyle could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Beside him, Lisa's hand rested near her sidearm, ready for anything. Then Zixthar laughed. It was a horrible sound, like metal scraping on stone. Other council members joined in. The laughter echoed through the chamber, growing louder and more mocking. "You believe you can dictate terms to us?" Zixthar said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You are a primitive species that achieved faster than light travel mere days ago. You have no colonies beyond your solar system. Your military consists of a few hundred ships, and you dare to propose that we treat you as equals?" "Yes," Kyle said simply. The laughter stopped. Zixthar's 4 eyes focused on Kyle with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "Then you are fools. The Council has maintained galactic order for 3,000 years. We are not a democracy of equals. We are a hierarchy of wisdom and power. Your position in that hierarchy is at the bottom, and you will accept this reality or be crushed by it." Lisa Grant stepped forward. "We anticipated that response. So we came prepared with evidence." She pulled out a small device and activated it. Suddenly the air filled with recordings, audio files, video feeds, data streams. All of them showed council members in private communications. Kyle and his team had spent the last 2 days breaking Council encryption and accessing their internal networks. What they found was damning. "These are your private conversations," Lisa said, her voice hard. Council members discussing how to maximize tribute from member species. Debates about whether to allow certain technologies because they might make species too independent. Strategies for keeping civilizations weak and dependent. You don't maintain order. You maintain control. Zixthar stood from his throne and suddenly he seemed much larger. "You dare spy on the Council? You dare violate our security? You violated the sovereignty of 73 species," Kyle shot back. "We just documented it." Jake Morrison stepped forward next, holding his datapad. "We also found something interesting in your economic records. The tribute you collect from member species doesn't go to maintaining peace or providing protection. 60% of it funds the Council's personal wealth and luxury. Another 30% goes to maintaining the enforcement fleet. Only 10% is actually used for the public goods you claim to provide." Dr. Susan Clark, who had been standing quietly behind them, now moved forward. She was a scientist, not a diplomat, but her voice carried authority. "And we analyzed the technological development of member species. Every single species that joined the Council stopped advancing within 50 years of integration. Some have been at the same technological level for over a millennium. This isn't protection. It's systematic suppression." The Council members were no longer laughing. Several of them had stood from their thrones. The aliens in the viewing galleries above were making sounds of shock and confusion. Kyle realized that most of them probably didn't know the truth. The member species had been kept in the dark about the Council's real nature. Zixthar's voice dropped to a threatening whisper that somehow carried through the entire chamber. "You have made a grave mistake, humans. You have insulted the Council. You have exposed information that was meant to remain private, and you have proposed terms that are utterly unacceptable. There will be consequences." "We accept those consequences," Kyle said. "But before you threaten us further, consider this. We're broadcasting this conversation across every known communication frequency. Every species in the galaxy is hearing what we're saying. Every member of your Council is learning the truth about your system. You can attack us, but you can't silence what we've already revealed." This was the gamble. Kyle had no idea if anyone was actually listening. Human transmission technology was crude compared to what the Council used, but the threat was enough to make Zixthar hesitate. "You believe other species will rise up against us?" The High Chancellor's voice was mocking, but there was an edge of concern underneath. "They are weak, dependent. They need us. They needed you because you made them need you," Kyle replied. "You created a system where they couldn't survive without you, and then you called it protection. But systems can change, and we're offering an alternative." Another Council member spoke, the crystalline being that pulsed with light. Its voice was like chimes. "Even if what you say is true, what makes you think you can survive alone? The Council has resources you cannot imagine, military power you cannot match. We have maintained control for 3,000 years, not through deception, but through strength." Lisa smiled. It was not a friendly expression. "Then come and take us. Send your enforcement fleet to Earth. Let's see if your 3,000-year-old military is as strong as you think it is." Zixthar's eyes narrowed. "You want war?" "We want freedom," Kyle said. "If you offer it peacefully, we'll accept. If you try to take it from us, we'll fight. Those are your options, High Chancellor. Give us what every species deserves, or try to conquer us and prove everything we've said about you is true." The tension in the chamber was crushing. Kyle could see the Council members looking at each other, communicating in ways he couldn't detect. Around them, the viewing galleries were erupting in conversation. The member species were talking, arguing, questioning. Finally, Zixthar spoke again. "The Council will deliberate on your response. You will return to your vessel and await our decision." "How long?" Kyle asked. "As long as necessary." Zixthar sat back down on his throne. "But I will tell." The Council's enforcement fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system exactly 3 days after the confrontation at the Grand Assembly Hall. General Marcus Webb watched them appear on his tactical displays, 300 warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel in a coordinated formation. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, each ship a work of art designed to intimidate as much as to fight. "Well," Marcus said from his command center deep beneath the surface of Mars, "they're not wasting time." Around him, dozens of officers monitored screens and coordinated Earth's defense network. The solar system had been preparing for this moment since the Defiant returned. Every military vessel was deployed, every defense platform activated, every colony on alert. Captain Rick Palmer commanded the destroyer Resolution, positioned near Jupiter's orbit. He was a veteran of the asteroid mining conflicts, a man in his early 40s with a reputation for aggressive tactics. His ship was small compared to the Council vessels, but it was fast and heavily armed with humanity's latest weapons. "All ships, this is command," Marcus said over the fleet-wide channel. "Remember your training. Stay mobile, work in groups, and don't let them pin you down. They have size and numbers. We have speed and innovation. Make it count." The Council fleet moved forward, accelerating toward the inner solar system. They weren't trying to hide their approach or use clever tactics. They came on like a hammer, direct and overwhelming. It was the strategy of a force that had never faced real opposition. Rick Palmer watched them come and smiled. "Resolution to command. Requesting permission to engage." "Granted," Marcus replied. "All forward units, weapons free." Rick's hands moved across his controls. "You heard the General. Let's show these aliens what humanity can do. All weapons target the lead vessel. Fire." The Resolution's railguns opened up, accelerated projectiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The missiles followed, dozens of them, each equipped with warheads designed specifically for this kind of target. Rick had spent the last 3 days studying the Council ships, looking for weaknesses in their design. The Council vessel's shields lit up as the projectiles hit. Energy barriers deflected most of the damage exactly as expected. But 3 missiles got through, detonating against the hull. Explosions blossomed in the vacuum of space. "Target damaged," reported Rick's tactical officer, "but still operational." "Then hit them again," Rick ordered. The Resolution wasn't alone. 30 other human ships opened fire simultaneously, targeting 3 Council cruisers. The aliens returned fire, energy beams lancing through space, but the human ships were already moving. They scattered in a choreographed pattern, making themselves hard to track. One beam caught a human corvette, burning through its armor in seconds. The ship exploded in a ball of fire that died as quickly as it appeared. First blood to the Council, but Rick's second volley found its mark. The damaged Council cruiser's shields collapsed and a railgun round punched straight through its hull. Secondary explosions rippled across the vessel and it began to drift, powerless. "One down," Rick said grimly. 299 to go. Commander Nina Foster coordinated the defense platforms scattered throughout the solar system. She was younger than most of the commanders, just 35, but she had designed half of the weapon systems humanity was now using. From her post on Europa Station, she watched the battle unfold across multiple screens. "Platform Group 7, activate and fire," she ordered. Hidden among the asteroids between Mars and Jupiter, weapon platforms came online. They had been disguised as mining equipment, waiting for this moment. Railguns, missile batteries, and directed energy weapons all fired at once, catching a formation of Council ships in a devastating crossfire. 2 more Council vessels took critical damage. One lost propulsion and began tumbling. The other's reactor went critical and it vanished in a blinding explosion. Nina smiled. "Platforms 8 through 12 prepare to fire on my mark, and somebody get me a damage assessment on their flagship." Jake Morrison was aboard the command ship Defiant, now positioned in Earth's orbit. He was running tactical analysis, feeding information to all the other commanders. His screen showed everything happening across the solar system, a vast 3-dimensional battlefield that humanity had to defend. "General Webb," he said over the command channel, "I'm seeing a pattern. The Council ships are strong but slow to adapt. They're using standard formations that probably worked against every other species they conquered. But those formations assume the enemy will try to meet them head-on. And we're not doing that," Marcus replied. "Exactly. We're hitting from unexpected angles, using the asteroids and moons for cover, concentrating fire on individual targets. They're taking casualties, but they're not changing their approach." Marcus considered this. "How many have we destroyed or disabled?" 5 confirmed destroyed, 3 disabled. "But we've lost 8 ships and 2 platforms. Not a favorable ratio." "No, sir. But we're learning their patterns. And I think they're starting to realize we're more dangerous than they expected." On the Council flagship, High Chancellor Zixthar watched the battle with growing anger. The humans were supposed to break immediately, to see the size of the enforcement fleet and surrender in terror. Instead, They were fighting with a skill and ferocity that surprised him. "How many vessels have we lost?" he demanded. 8 destroyed, 5 damaged beyond combat effectiveness, his tactical officer reported. "The humans are using guerrilla tactics. They refuse to engage us directly. Then we will force them to engage." Sixthar pointed to the tactical display. "Order the fleet to advance on Earth directly. If we threaten their homeworld, they will have to defend it in open battle." The Council fleet changed course, accelerating toward Earth. It was what Marcus had been waiting for. "They're committing to a direct assault," he said. "Nina, activate all planetary defense systems. Rick, take your squadron and hit their flanks. Make them divide their attention." The battle intensified as it moved toward Earth. The Council fleet was powerful, but humanity had prepared every inch of their home system. Mines drifted in seemingly empty space, activated remotely when Council ships passed. Missile pods hidden on moons and asteroids opened fire. Human ships darted in and out of engagement range, never staying still long enough to be targeted effectively. Rick Palmer pushed the resolution hard, dancing between energy beams that would vaporize his ship if they connected. His crew worked with the precision that came from hundreds of hours of simulations. They had war-gamed this exact scenario dozens of times. "Target their propulsion systems," Rick ordered. "We don't need to destroy them, just disable them." The Resolution's weapons locked onto a Council destroyer that had separated slightly from the main formation. Railgun rounds hammered into its engines. The alien ship tried to maneuver, but human weapons were designed for precision. One engine exploded, then another. The destroyer lost control, drifting away from the battle. "That's 6, Rick's tactical officer said. "Keep moving," Rick replied. "Don't let them target us." But the Council was adapting. They had faced 47 species before humanity, and they had learned from each one. Energy beams began firing in predicted patterns rather than tracking. They were trying to force human ships into kill zones. A human cruiser flew directly into one such zone. 3 beams converged on it simultaneously. The ship's shields collapsed and its hull melted. 70 crew members died in an instant. "They're learning," Jake Morrison reported from the Defiant. "Casualties are increasing." Marcus Webb made a decision. "All ships fall back to Earth orbit. We're going to make our stand here." The human fleet retreated, pulling the Council forces deeper into human territory. As the alien ships approached Earth, they found themselves surrounded by orbital platforms, satellites converted into weapons, and the largest concentration of human military power. Nina Foster coordinated the defense from Europa, her fingers moving across multiple control surfaces at once. "Fire everything. Don't hold back." The space around Earth lit up like a star. Thousands of weapons fired simultaneously. Energy beams, kinetic projectiles, missiles, and experimental weapons that humanity had developed in secret. The Council fleet flew into a wall of destruction. Ships on both sides exploded. The battle became chaos. Vessels maneuvering at high speed in close proximity, weapons firing in all directions. It was brutal, bloody, and desperate. Rick Palmer's Resolution took a glancing hit from an energy beam. Half his ship lost power. "Damage control, get me engines back online." "Working on it, sir," his engineer replied. Another Council ship targeted the Resolution, charging its main weapon. Rick could see it on his screens, death approaching in the form of a massive energy blast. Then a human battleship, the Titan's Fury, moved between them. The blast hit the battleship's shields, overloading them instantly. The ship took critical damage, but it had bought Rick time. "Engines online," his engineer reported. "Full reverse now," Rick ordered. The Resolution pulled back just as the Titan's Fury exploded, the blast wave buffeting Rick's ship but not destroying it. They had lost good people, but the sacrifice had meaning. Jake Morrison was running calculations, trying to find some advantage in the chaos. The numbers were not good. General were holding them, but 6 months after the battle, Kyle Harris stood in a conference room that floated in neutral space. It was not on Earth, not in Council territory, but somewhere in between. A place where species that had never trusted each other could meet without fear. The room was simple, just a large chamber with a table and chairs designed to accommodate different body types. Through the windows, stars burned with quiet beauty. Kyle was not alone. Around the table sat representatives from 8 species, some he recognized from the Grand Assembly Hall, former Council members who had watched humanity's defiance. Others were new contacts, species that had remained hidden from galactic politics until now. Lisa Grant stood behind Kyle, Her role shifted from military captain to security chief for the new alliance. Jake Morrison sat at the table, his data pad spread before him, ready to document everything. And across from Kyle sat beings that represented hope for a different kind of galaxy. The first to speak was a being from the Kelvor species, a tall creature with blue skin and 3 fingers on each hand. Her name was Syrah, and she had been a minor official in the council bureaucracy before the rebellion. Ambassador Harris, my people want to thank humanity for what you did. The council had controlled us for 800 years. We never thought resistance was possible until we saw you fight. We just refused to accept chains, Kyle replied. Any species would have done the same given the courage. But no species did, said another representative, a small being covered in silver fur. He represented the Torvin, a species that had secretly opposed the council for decades. That is what makes humanity different. You had everything to lose and nothing to gain, yet you stood firm. Lisa leaned forward slightly. We lost 3,000 people in that battle. 22 ships. That's not nothing. I apologize, the Torvin said quickly. I meant no disrespect. What I mean is that humanity showed the galaxy what was possible. You paid a price, yes, but you also won something invaluable. Freedom. Jake Morrison pulled up a holographic display that showed the galactic situation. The council is in chaos. 15 member species have declared independence. 20 more are in open negotiation for reduced tribute. The enforcement fleet is spread thin, trying to maintain control. They're not in a position to threaten anyone right now. But they will recover eventually, Syrah said. The council has resources we cannot match. Even in chaos, they are powerful. Which is why we need to formalize our alliance now, Kyle said, before they can regroup and come for us one by one. Over the next week, the representatives worked on creating something the galaxy had never seen before. The Free Species Alliance, an organization built on principles that contradicted everything the council stood for. Equal representation for all members, shared technology and resources without tribute, mutual defense without surrender of sovereignty, democratic decision-making where every species had a voice. It was not easy. Species that had never met before had to learn to trust each other. Cultural differences caused misunderstandings. There were arguments about resources, territory, and military command structures. But slowly, painfully, the alliance took shape. Helen Scott arrived in the second week, having stepped down as Prime Minister of Earth to take on a new role. She was nominated to be the first chairperson of the Galactic Assembly of Free Worlds, the governing body of the new alliance. When the vote came, it was unanimous. I accept this position with humility, Helen said, standing before the representatives. Humanity does not seek to replace the Council's tyranny with our own. We seek true partnership. My role is not to rule, but to facilitate, to help all of us work together as equals. Dr. Peter Kane established the Institute for Interspecies Cooperation, a research organization dedicated to sharing knowledge freely among alliance members. His first project was a database of technology that any member could access. It was the opposite of the Council's model, where knowledge was hoarded and controlled. The Council kept species weak by keeping them ignorant, Peter explained to Kyle one evening. We're going to make everyone strong through education. It's a risk. Some species might use this knowledge in ways we don't like, but freedom means accepting that risk. General Marcus Webb had a different challenge. The Alliance needed military coordination for mutual defense, but without the coercion the Council had used. He met with military leaders from all member species, designing a system where each maintained their own forces but could call on allies when threatened. It's like the old NATO alliance from Earth's history, he explained to Helen. An attack on one is an attack on all. But each nation maintains sovereignty. It worked for over a century on Earth. It can work across the galaxy. The former council was not idle during this time. High Chancellor Zixthar attempted to negotiate with the rebel species, offering reduced tribute and greater autonomy. Some species accepted, too afraid to completely break away, but others refused, having seen that a better option existed. The council also tried to isolate the Free Species Alliance economically, cutting off trade routes and refusing to engage in commerce. But this strategy backfired. Alliance members began trading with each other, developing new routes and markets. Species that had been dependent on council trade found they could thrive without it. Amy Brooks, promoted to head of humanity's diplomatic corps, spent her days meeting with species considering joining the alliance. She was young for such responsibility, but her passion and clarity made her effective. "We're not asking you to fight," she told a representative from the Mortec species, a cautious people who had endured council rule for over a millennium. "We're asking you to stand. There's a difference. Fighting is something you do against others. Standing is something you do for yourself." The Mortec joined 3 days later, bringing with them advanced medical technology that they shared freely with all Alliance members. Kyle Harris found himself in a strange position. He had been a diplomat for Earth, comfortable representing one species. Now he was helping to coordinate dozens of species, each with their own needs and perspectives. It was exhausting and frustrating, but also deeply meaningful. One evening, he stood with Lisa Grant looking out at the stars from the Alliance headquarters, a station they had built together in neutral space. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Lisa asked quietly. "Starting a war?" Kyle replied. "Leading thousands of people to fight and die?" Standing up to the council, Kyle was quiet for a long moment. "I think we did the only thing we could do and still remain human. The council offered us survival in exchange for our soul. We chose to keep our soul and fight for survival instead. Some people back on Earth say we were reckless, that we should have accepted the terms and worked for change from within." "Maybe they're right," Kyle admitted, "but I've spent 6 months watching species discover what freedom feels like. Watching them trade ideas and technologies without permission. Watching them make decisions for themselves. I don't think any of that would have happened if we had accepted subjugation." A message came through on Lisa's communication device. She read it and smiled. "The council just sent a formal request for negotiations. They want to discuss mutual recognition and non-aggression. They're recognizing our right to exist as an independent organization? Seems like it. They're not calling us rebels or criminals anymore. They're calling us the Free Species Alliance, using our actual name." Kyle felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, genuine hope that this might actually work. The negotiations took place 3 months later. Kyle sat across from High Chancellor Zixthar once more, but this time the dynamic was different. Zixthar was not dictating terms. He was negotiating as an equal, or at least as close to equal as pride would allow. "The Council acknowledges the Free Species Alliance as a legitimate political entity," Zixthar said, the words clearly painful for him. "We propose a treaty of mutual recognition and non-aggression. We will not interfere in your territories. You will not interfere in ours." "And what about species currently under Council control who want to leave?" Kyle asked. Zixthar's 4 eyes blinked slowly. "That is an internal Council matter. It's a matter of freedom," Helen Scott said. She sat beside Kyle, speaking with the authority of her new position. "The Alliance believes all species have the right to self-determination. We will not sign any treaty that prevents species from choosing their own path." The negotiations were tense and difficult. The Council wanted to maintain control over their remaining members. The Alliance insisted on the right of any species to leave. Eventually, they reached a compromise. Species could leave the Council, but there would be a transition period to avoid economic collapse. The Council would not use military force to prevent departure, and the Alliance would not actively recruit Council members. It was not perfect, but it was progress. Rick Palmer returned to military service, but his role had changed. Instead of preparing for war, he was training joint forces from multiple species to work together. It was challenging work. Each species had different communication methods, different tactical approaches, different concepts of discipline and hierarchy. "It's like herding cats," he complained to Nina Foster during a training exercise. "Cats from different planets who don't even agree on what a cat is," Nina laughed. She had moved from Europa Station to the